Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining. Samuel Smalling, I'm a product marketing manager here at Comforta. I'm very happy to have you all here for this webinar talking about data protection in cloud-based environments. We're going to have two speakers today, which I'll introduce and then pass it off to them. So first, we'll have a guest speaker from Forrester, Heidi Shea. She's a principal over at Forrester who's covering a variety of topics around data security, privacy strategy, policies, zero trust, data discovery, and more. And then secondly, we will have Mirza Salihajic, who is head of product marketing here at Comforta. He'll dive a little bit more in continuation of that topic, talking about a few aspects around data protection in cloud environments as well. So to begin, Heidi, I'm going to pass it off to you. She'll be covering a little bit around businesses using data, requirements of modernization, demand for security controls, different security challenges and such. So Heidi, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us here today and taking the time to tune in. So let's get started. We advance to the next slide. There we go. So privacy, analytics, data. I mean, if we think about it, we're not just collecting data for the sake of collecting data. The value of data really is in its use, the insights, the decisions that we get from the data. And it's one thing when we're dealing with operational data, because this could be sensitive to the business, we want to protect it. Great. It's another thing when we're dealing with personal information, whether it's data relating to your customers, data relating to your employees. Now it's a matter of how are you protecting this data, ensuring that you are respecting these individuals' privacy rights when it comes to how you're handling this data, how you're using the data. And this is why we're focusing on, this is what we focus on from a security, privacy, compliance perspective. And when I say we, I mean security teams, privacy officers, compliance managers, legal, risk managers. But it's not just about us. It's bigger than that. And like you see on the data here, it's ultimately about the business. It's about the people who are in charge of data management. It's about the individuals using the data, working with the data, your data science teams, the people who are analyzing data as a part of their jobs, and the benefits that they see and derive from the use of that data. So these are the top 5 things that we've seen within Forrester's survey data, the top 5 benefits that organizations see when it comes to using data. So probably not too surprising to a lot of folks. It's something that can help to improve quality, consistency, make better decisions, drive new revenue streams. The bottom line here is that data and how it's being used is helping companies make money, to bring in new customers, to delight their existing customers, to be more efficient. And there's an implication here that this data use, that these efforts are driving growth for the business. And this involves understanding more about the data environments that are in use, understanding how data is used, what this data is. These are all important context when it comes to the decisions that we make for how to best protect it. So sometimes I joke that my role when I'm talking to my clients is that I'm providing marriage counseling or relationship advice, helping them to identify the questions to ask, the considerations for better understanding what some of their peers outside of IT are doing. And that's also where I'm taking everyone here today, providing a bit more context for you about why some of these major changes to data environments can also change your approach when it comes to data protection. And next slide, please. All right. Today, many organizations, they are modernizing their data management practices, the platforms that they use, because they have to, especially if they want to accomplish these 3 key things that we see in our research, which is enabling real-time data across multiple domains. So think of real-time data as data from modern business applications, from streaming analytics solutions. Traditional data management architectures, they can't quite keep up with the amount of data processing and delivery that's required for real-time data. And companies also want to support self-service for their business users because it gives them agility. It's a requirement today to be able to empower these business users, like your data scientists, to engage directly with these data platforms, to reduce the amount of IT involvement when it comes to data provisioning. I've heard from some organizations where the traditional way of doing this, of provisioning data, is just, it's so slow. You might have a business user who makes a request for data, and somehow in the background, going through the checks, the processes, cleaning, thinking about compliance requirements, it could take weeks before they actually have access to the data that they need. And that's just, it's not acceptable today. It is too manual, too slow of a process. And companies are also trying to connect data across these different silos. We've got data scattered across different geographic regions, different clouds, different edges. So these requirements, they also demand that we change our approach in terms of where we're putting our data into different data cloud platforms. And the next slide goes over some of the key ones that we see today with this modernization. So there's different key types of data platforms, and it's usually described by the use case of the platform. Your customer data management platforms, these would be things like a Twilio, for example, your IoT data management solutions. This could be something like a Cloudera, Google, MongoDB, and data collaboration platforms. This could be things like Snowflake is a really big example here as well. And there's many types. These are the ones that I see brought up most often in my discussions with security leaders today. And that is mostly the last one, the data collaboration platforms, whether it's being used for internal data sharing purposes or external data sharing in collaboration with partners. And then sometimes I see the IoT management solutions as well. But what's interesting is that it's not just security leaders who are asking questions about security, privacy, and compliance. Increasingly, I'm also seeing data management leaders asking questions about these types of concerns as well. And that's a big thing. So next slide, please. This growing awareness of the importance of protecting this data that's being used is something that Forrester has also seen reflected within our survey data as well. So this is from a survey of data and analytics decision makers. So they don't have that IT or security background. We asked them what were their biggest challenges when it came to executing on their vision for data analytics, for data management. And the things that came out on top were the maturity of technologies for data management, as well as security, along with some other ones down on this list that could tie back to privacy and compliance as well, especially the one around business issues with data stewardship and governance, understanding the data. All of these things are related in some way. I think it's also important to note that when we look at these types of concerns and challenges, technology for security is often technology that supports privacy compliance when we're talking about data security controls. Next slide, please. Because data security, privacy, these are things that they are intertwined, right? You can have security without privacy, but not the other way around. Because if you are trying to enforce privacy practices, you have to have the security controls in place. And privacy compliance, it demands it. It demands typically what you see as reasonable security controls based on your assessment of risk, your environment. And this is coming from requirements all over, whether it's GDPR, whether it's various country-level privacy regulations or US state-specific privacy laws. For a global organization, you really need to adopt this high watermark of your privacy practices and data controls to be able to sustain compliance and really be agile in how you respond to various evolving requirements around privacy. You don't want to reinvent the wheel each time for each new jurisdiction or each change and scramble to increase your controls. It's much better if you can start at that higher bar, especially because we see these requirements becoming more stringent over time. And your privacy tech stack for supporting these programs around privacy, enforcing your policies, it's coming from a mix of new as well as established technologies today. So your privacy team may be using privacy management software to manage workflows, to take their program out of just spreadsheets for organizing things. There might be privacy process-specific technologies within your environment, like consent management, or technologies that support data subject access, rights request fulfillment, for example. And then there's also security technologies that are being applied for privacy use cases. And so this is an area where I've been looking quite a bit into because it's some of these controls, they've been around, but now they're being applied for this other use case. And so privacy preserving technologies is something that also falls under this categories as well. Some of the things today that could get categorized as privacy preserving tech, or maybe privacy enhancing technology, depending on what term you're seeing being used. These are, some of them are existing security technologies that are also now being repurposed for privacy use cases. So things like tokenization, things like data masking, for example, various approaches and techniques when it comes to de-identifying data. So it's exciting. There's a lot of options, but with options and with choice come decisions that we have to make. And with privacy preserving tech, it's not just one singular technology as well. It's a combination of these approaches. So the ones that I already mentioned, like masking, tokenization, these are what I would characterize as, think of it as privacy filtering. So it changes how that data user is able to view or access that information. But you also have other security controls that are more aligned for data processing and protection for data in use. This could be approaches like homomorphic encryption, for example. And then you may have also heard of things like confidential computing or data clean rooms. This is another segment of privacy preserving tech that's more to do with the security controls for the environment where that data processing happens. So it's a wide mixture of things that can be used as controls here. Next slide, please. And so there are all sorts of controls. And these modern data platforms today that are in organizations, they often have some controls built in as well, which is a good thing, because they try to make it easy. They recognize that compliance and data protection are key considerations for working with the data. But it's really critical to distinguish between the controls that these platforms are building in for protecting the workload or the infrastructure versus what may be data controls. So if I'm thinking of data controls, it's typically, you might find controls around access, whether it's authentication, authorization, role-based access controls. You may also find built-in controls for obfuscating data. This could be masking, tokenization, encryption, as well as built-in capabilities around data classification and tagging. These would be the ones that I would focus on more as data controls. But there's also a difference in what's being built into these platforms, because oftentimes they're focused on the perspective of you implement these controls for compliance purposes, which is good, it's important. But we have to recognize that compliance is also slightly different from security as well. So they're not equivalent. Next slide, please. And when we're thinking about controls, whether it's built in or call it best of breed, a third-party solution for various data controls, there's this question of, well, which one do I go with? Is one a better option than the other? And there's no right or wrong answer here, because there's reasons why each of these exist. Each one has as value in terms of an approach. And when I'm talking to companies today about this, it's this thinking through of considerations of areas of what they're prioritizing, what does their overall environment look like, what available resources they have when they're trying to decide which option to go with. And some of the things that you see highlighted here, these are just common points of discussion and considerations that organizations need to make. Assess the cost of each. Sometimes it's cheaper to get it built in, but maybe you're sacrificing something else in terms of either control capability or something else like performance. Typically, a best of breed type of tool may offer you more capabilities when it comes to controls to choose from. And then it's also important to consider both the employee experience as well as the administrator experience of the controls that you're implementing. Employee experience is, think of this as what the workforce, what the data users are experiencing when they're trying to work with the data. Are these controls causing more friction or maybe unnecessary friction for them? The administrator experience is more to do on the IT side, the person who's trying to manage the policies for data access, the person who is managing these tools that you're implementing for data security controls. And what does that look like in terms of the workload for them, the burden of trying to manage policies? Platform telemetry is more of a question of, well, what types of insights do these various platforms collect? What can they surface for you that would be helpful in terms of either enforcing access controls or insights that help you with, let's say, an investigation if there's something that goes wrong? Integration options, for example, with other things within your environment, whether it's security tools or other data management tools. And then tech provider risk is one that can come up, but most often I see that as a consideration if the organization is considering a startup, for example, as a vendor that they would work with, because they, sometimes these companies could get acquired, sometimes they could go away. So that is certainly a risk to consider if this is the route to go. And then next, please. And last one. So I also get asked about what does it mean to take a data-centric approach? And I think it stems from this confusion today that I see about security technologies. The purpose for all of your cybersecurity investments and tools is to protect data. But when you're trying to categorize different technologies as data security, it gets a bit fuzzy, right? So this is how I try to frame things to help people really simplify. Think of a data-centric approach, a data-centric control, as something that can help you to, one, define and understand what it is you're trying to protect. So oftentimes this involves capabilities like data discovery, data classification. And then it also enables you to apply some type of control to enforce a policy around data access, data use, or the data's life cycle. And here you see that define is distinct from the controls. Because there's a question of, well, if you have persistent control on your data, maybe there's no need to define it. And that's partially true if you're only looking at the controls from a security perspective. But if you are trying to also think about privacy compliance, it's still critical to define your data because that is context about what this is, so that you can do things like support rights request, for example, and manage things like consent. So there's still a purpose when it comes to classification for those use cases. So overall, this is a view to try to help people simplify, because sometimes we need to take a step back, look at the bigger picture of what we may be missing before we're diving back in to figure out the details of what specific controls and why we're implementing them. And with that, thank you very much. I'm going to turn things back over to Mirza.
Thank you so much, Heidi, and we appreciate the insights there that you provided over data security and what your findings have shown. Now we're going to move over to Mirza, who's our product marketing here at Comforta. And he'll talk a little bit more about what a data-centric security strategy and privacy-preserving technology looks like within those cloud-based environments for organizations managing sensitive data.
So again, yeah, thank you very much, Samuel. Thanks everybody for joining. Thank you, Heidi, for the great presentation, these very valuable insights. So I just want to say, we see very similar patterns when talking to our customers and prospects. They want to use data, of course, for business opportunities to enhance their products and services, to make their marketing and sales more effective, to generate those business insights and improve decision making, right? And ultimately, they want to grow their business, drive revenue, increase customer retention and loyalty by providing personalized offers based on customers' purchasing behavior and preferences. But what is holding them back are security and compliance concerns. Mainly because of course, cybersecurity threats, compliance and privacy-related issues, financial risks caused by data breaches and non-compliance with data protection regulations are huge. Last year alone, there have been $3.1 billion worth of fines issued against organizations for violations of the GDPR, which is more than double than a year before. In 2021, 40 billion user records were exposed globally, and PII, which is, of course, personal identifiable information, was the most common type of record lost or stolen. It was included in 44% of all breaches. And, protecting data seems to be, of course, more important, but also more difficult than ever before, because security teams, as also Heidi mentioned, need to tackle many challenges simultaneously. One of the main reasons is the complexity of modern data environments, where data is stored, transferred, and used in a variety of systems and applications that are spread across hybrid multi-cloud environments. And this whole environment is usually not under full control of your security team, right? Because data in the cloud is stored in data centers of cloud service providers, cloud-based database management systems, and so on and so forth. And they do offer some built-in capabilities like Heidi mentioned, but it should be clear that those providers are responsible only for security of their infrastructure, of their part of the cloud, right? But it's your responsibility, of course, to protect data and data of your customers. So this makes move to the cloud much more difficult for companies in specific regions where we have those stringent privacy and data transfer regulations, or for some heavily regulated industries, right? Remote work, of course, adds complexity, people accessing applications, corporate applications and data stores from all over the place, getting access to the data, copying, sharing it, and so on and so forth. Growing threat of cyber attacks, everybody is aware of that. Increasing number of regulations. We see more and more data privacy laws being introduced globally, stronger law enforcement, and at the same time, we see a shortage of cybersecurity talent, which makes it very difficult to tackle these challenges and manage, security in a kind of efficient way. So at the end, this is a huge challenge for the companies because of the complexity and because of the huge amount of siloed solutions that need to be managed and that cannot really solve, the problem end to end. And all of this is slowing down data-driven projects and initiatives, as it is very difficult for the teams to find the right balance and bridge that gap between the need to properly secure the data and business users need to use that data. So if they do not reconsider the way they approach the data security, companies will continue to struggle. Data security and compliance teams will continue to struggle with all that complexity and lack of resources that I just mentioned, making an efficient and cost-effective security management quite impossible, while at the same time not really reducing the risk of data exposure and data breaches. Without the right tools and the right technology to streamline data security and data governance, the risk of non-compliance will continue to be there. And you will have struggles to easily adapt to changed or new regulations. Business teams, on the other hand, they are not able to access and leverage all of the relevant data. They cannot move the data to the cloud, use their tools of choice. So at the end, they will not be able to innovate and turn that data into business value, right? So we see this becoming a bigger and bigger problem for customers and businesses, and sometimes it even leads to a general perception that privacy, security, and data analytics are kind of contradictory. So this is something that we, of course, don't agree with, and we want to help change, because we believe, of course, in importance of privacy and importance of security. We are a data security company, but we also believe in power of data and value that it has for the businesses. So we enable our customers to do both, to protect their data, preserve privacy of their customers, achieve compliance with data protection standards and regulations, but at the same time, enable that use of data for the businesses to generate insights and to do innovation, right? So we see security as a continuous process where you need to discover, protect your data on continuous basis in order to make your data environments compliant in a sustainable way. We can enable you to operate on protected data, enabling meaningful analytics, enabling more secure data sharing. And since we know that, of course, security projects might become quite time-consuming and challenging in terms of integration with existing applications and data stores, we designed our platform to allow for quick and efficient implementation. So the goal with our platform that I mentioned is to help customers accelerate data-driven projects and enable their business teams to use the data without compliance and security concerns with data-centric approach by focusing on protecting data itself rather than systems or devices that hold that data, right? So our data security platform is built to help you discover all the sensitive data, protect it wherever it flows across the data ecosystem at all states, like at rest, of course, in motion, but also in use. Even if it's stolen by bad actors, that data will stay protected and useless to the attackers, and you can easily integrate it into your data environment. So it's a complete platform from discovery to protection, helping customers to automate data discovery, classification with assistance of AI and machine learning, being able to find all the data, identify sensitive elements such as PII, for example, and do this in an automated, continuous way with very high accuracy. So you're able also to catalog all your sensitive data into a PII inventory and a master data catalog, where you then have that real-time and accurate visibility into data lineage, helping you to understand how sensitive data is used across the enterprise, see data flows, changes to the data, and so on and so forth. Or, for example, easier manage data subject access requests. You're able to configure optimal policy for each data element, basically being able to define how each element should be protected, fully protected or partially protected. We are very flexible here. I'll show that in a minute or so. So all the policies are managed centrally across applications and executed based on user permissions and integration with your identity and access management system. You can then, of course, protect the data using a variety of methods we offer, from masking to tokenization to format preserving encryption, and easily integrate it into your data environment without the need to modify underlying applications, which results in an efficient and rapid implementation. So in terms of protection methods that I mentioned, we have different options to meet, of course, different needs by our customers. Which one are the best will always depend on the use case. We have a really nice ebook explaining in more details pros and cons of each method on our website. So if you're interested, I would suggest you to check it out. On a really high level, you have the possibility to anonymize or pseudonymize the data. Both options are helpful if you're looking for the right protection to achieve compliance with GDPR, for example. Pseudonymization, however, is a better fit if you, in addition to compliance, want to preserve that utility of data for processing or for analytics. So with format preserving encryption and tokenization, you can protect the data, but also keep it usable for the business. We can preserve the format of a data element, like the name says, format preserving encryption. So it will keep, for example, the same length. And we, of course, preserve the referential integrity. So to make it a little bit, to illustrate it a little bit better, here is a very simplified picture. On the left side, we have original data in plain text. As I said, super simple example. We can, of course, handle all types of sensitive data, social security numbers, names, emails, addresses, and so on and so forth. On the right side, you see some of the protection methods we offer: masking, tokenization, classic encryption. You can easily configure how to handle the data. We are flexible here, as I mentioned, so you can fully protect or mask, or you just partially protect it and leave specific characters in clear if that's required for a specific use case. We can also translate from one to another. And as I mentioned, tokenization and format preserving encryption not just protects the data, but also keeps it usable, because tokens keep the same format as original data, as you can see here. and you can still process them without the need to deprotect or modify your application or database. So this is not just relevant for security, because you do not need to deprotect, but also means less implementation effort. So let's take a look at how we can help better protect data analytics environments in particular. Also here, super simplified view. In modern data environments, data is of course moved from different sources to cloud-based data stores where it can be analyzed. So we have data sources, then we have data ingestion, basically moving that data to a central storage in the cloud, data warehouse, for example, or data lake, where data is prepared for consumption, so we can finally use it in our BI tools to analyze, identify patterns, and actually create that real business value out of it. Now, in all of these stages, we will probably have different components in use. We'll have some databases, ETL tools, BI tools, and so on and so forth. Some of them will be on-premises, some in the cloud, maybe also in multiple clouds. The bigger organization, the more complex it usually gets. So if we would apply a traditional security approach with that siloed protection and use those built-in features, we would end up in a kind of huge patchwork with different protection mechanisms, inconsistent controls, and misaligned policies. And the more complex the environment and the more tools we need to manage, the higher the risk of security gaps, of misconfigurations, and data exposure, of course. And depending on the technologies we use, we might even need to deprotect the data every time it moves from one place to another, or in case when it is supposed to be used, no matter if deprotection is really required for business purposes or not. Which, of course, if we do all the time, protect and deprotect, it's not only creating risk of exposure, but also might have negative impact on performance. So it becomes very complex, very inefficient to manage the security here really consistently across the whole environment. And at the same time, make sure that you are compliant with data protection regulations. So in order to simplify and streamline the security for data analytics, we recommend to protect the data in a way that the security really travels with the data wherever it flows, using that data-centric approach. Again, while traditional security approach focuses on protecting the systems, applications, and devices that hold the data, data-centric security approach focuses on protecting the data itself. So if we apply security controls directly to data, we are able to streamline the process and close those security gaps because we protect the data across its life cycle at any time, even if it gets lost or stolen, as I said. So at the same time, we preserve that utility of the data so it can be used for the analysis. And two principles that we follow here are protect as early as possible, which means ideally immediately at the moment of capture, and deprotect only if absolutely necessary for business reasons. So only authorized users can see the data, and if really, really required. And this is why our technology is designed for very flexible integration, as I mentioned, allowing us to integrate at all relevant stages and protect data end-to-end, from sources to ingestion to warehouses and analytics tools, enabling our customers to have that control over data and flexibility to onboard also new functionalities and applications wherever and whenever they need them. So this goes both for discovery components as well as protection components. We're able to protect the data at source, so only tokens are loaded into cloud stores and applications. This is something that a lot of our customers want, protect the data and sensitive data, of course, before it even enters the cloud. But we also see customers who have their data already, of course, in a data warehouse and now need more than just those built-in security features. So flexibility of integration is something we really, really care about, right? As a result, organizations can implement data projects that were previously impossible because of these privacy or security concerns, bridge that gap between security and privacy and data utility. So security and compliance teams can now get complete control of the sensitive data. They can simplify data security and governance, improve protection and privacy, increase efficiency and agility by applying those security controls directly on the data, having consistent protection across the data environment, streamlining and reducing the overhead. And business teams can now get access and leverage all the relevant data sets, something they would not be able to do without proper data protection. And by being able to do that, to work with that data, they can also deliver that expected business value. So having said that, I would like to say thank you very much for your attention and hand over back to Samuel. So Sam, back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mirza, for that overview. We did have a few questions come in. First to Heidi. With data management, there are business stakeholders involved who often drive the investment decisions. How are organizations determining these security requirements for such platforms?
I think these are conversations where it's the organization tries to get ahead of these decisions. I know that doesn't always happen in the perfect world. Oftentimes I do see security teams getting pulled in almost after the fact to vet these things or to provide more clarity in terms of requirements. But what I've seen in some organizations where they can be more proactive, more successful, is if this is something that's coming out from like a data governance team or a committee where they're making these decisions, getting everybody on the same page to begin with, even about things like key terms. Because you have data management business stakeholders who might be using terms like data classification, but they mean something very different than what someone on security or privacy may be thinking in terms of classification and the purposes of it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Heidi. Heidi, we did have another question for you. Are there different data security controls to consider for different types of data? For example, customer data versus IoT data?
Differences in controls. Usually not a whole lot. I mean, these are different types of data, but the kinds of controls or the combinations that people would select are usually pretty similar when it comes to the protection piece, because maybe it's tokenization, maybe it's encryption or something else. Where it may be different is if we're thinking about policies and controls around things like data lifecycle management. At what point is this data considered no longer useful? So maybe you want to purge it, delete it, but it's also some of the practices that are on the front end of ingesting and collecting this data, being able to apply data minimization practices for things like customer data, which would be a little bit different than the operational data.
I see, wonderful. Mirza, we had a question for you specifically. You mentioned data catalogs. Do you have your own or do you integrate with others such as Calibra, for example?
Yep. Yes, as I mentioned, we provide catalog where you have that visibility into the sensitive data. However, we of course know that a lot of companies use other catalogs as well. So we do integrate with other solutions, like for example, Calibra, so the customers can use our discovery and classification capabilities in combination with other products, of course.
Wonderful. And Mirza, another question for Comforta. Do you support external tokenization with Snowflake? Yep,
we do. We are partnering with Snowflake to provide this integration for our joint customers. As I mentioned, some customers already have data in the cloud, in data warehouses, and they want to use possibilities of external tokenization. So if you're interested to learn more about that, you can find also a couple of materials on our website, but also in technical documentation of Snowflake, where we are listed as a provider of external tokenization.
And we only have a few minutes left, so I'll try to run through these questions as fast as possible. So Heidi, we had another question come in. Can you please elaborate on data clean rooms? What is the purpose and value of those?
Oh, data clean rooms. So these are usually meant for data collaboration types of use cases. And some of them are essentially places where you have multiple organizations they could be pulling together data. They could be trying to share data with each other for analytics purposes, where they're setting either policies for how these other organizations could be using the data, how they could be sharing data, but also determining what are the controls that they're going to put on that data before they share it with these other partners. And the clean room is think of it as that neutral space where these interactions, where these analytics could be happening.
Wonderful. And then last question to Mirza. Do you protect structured data only?
Oh, that's a good question. In terms of, so we work with, in terms of data discovery and classification, we can help discover and find PII, for example, in structured, semi-structured, and unstructured data. In terms of protection, currently we protect structured and semi-structured data, and we work on also protecting unstructured data in the future.
Wonderful. Thank you both to Heidi and Mirza for answering those questions. So thank you all to the attendees that joined today. Unfortunately, we're out of time. If we did not get to your question live, we are more than happy to follow up with you directly. You can also read about additional resources on the Comforta website at www.comforta.com/resources. And please feel also free to contact us via the Comforta webpage at www.comforta.com/contact as well. Today's presentation was being recorded, so we will provide that within the next 48 hours to view further review. But again, thank you all so much for joining. Thank you to Heidi and Forrester for taking time to join us today. And we hope you all have a wonderful and fantastic rest of your week. So thank you.